From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Our colleague Noel is still on an adventure, but will be returning very soon.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul, Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Let's begin tonight's exploration with a fantastic, if arguably a bit pretentious, quotation from the excellent writer David Foster Wallace. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" That's by This Is Water, David Foster Wallace.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That describes exactly what each and every one of us does when we open our eyes in the morning.
Right. And we have to participate in this thing that civilization has decided to call reality. Spoiler, no one knows how it works. What is reality? It's a question that's haunted philosophers, prophets, and scientists throughout the span of known history. A conundrum that probably, to be honest, predates technology like fire or the written word. We're still trying to figure it out. And in tonight's episode, we are returning to our own exploration of these strange, heady concepts. Here are the facts. Matt, since we're both fans of small talk, how would you explain reality?
Hey, pal. How's the air? Reality is the collective thing that we all experience, that we then get together and say, hey, this rock sure seems hard and solid, yeah? Yeah, this water sure seems wet and kind of cold at times, yeah? It's existence. Reality is experience through a meat body.
Yeah. I like that because we're talking already about sort of the filters through which reality is experienced. For human beings, reality comes through a surprisingly small set of inputs and filters. You know, most of them are what we call physical senses. You taste or smell things, you touch things, you see them, you might hear them, but there are deeper cuts. We've talked about proprioception, that's why you can close your eyes and touch your nose and stuff like that.
But it all goes back to a physical piece that in your ear, right? And some of the other things in your body that give you those things like balance. And in the end, it is a physical sense, but it's more, as you're saying, than the five, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also, one thing that philosophers quarrel over pretty often is the other aspect of what determines reality, which is the internal or cognitive processing of past experiences, the attempts at predicting future changes in your environment. And, we give humans a hard time on this show, but they're not bad at it. They're not bad at that one.
Oh, I don't know. I think a lot of us are a little bad at it. I know
I am. A little bad, sure. Yeah, a little bad, yes.
Because we really do color our own lenses, right? Or the stuff that's happened to us before, that we've done before, really does shape the way you see things.
Yeah, I was listening. I'm glad you said that, because I was listening to some conversations with a fascinating scientist named Robert Sapolsky, and he's talking about some of the same stuff we're ideating on here, Also, another thing to add to the bag of badgers is that we as a civilization know many other life forms have a different sort of kit of sensory inputs, right? Like electromagnetic sensitivity for birds and sharks. And isn't it, can't a lot of animals, non-human animals, can't they see into like ultraviolet and infrared spectrum?
Oh yeah. Well, think about a cat's eyes. That's why they're so cool to us, because they can sense stuff that we cannot. Ooh.
You got a ghost hunting cat?
I think so. Apparently there was a specter right outside my doorway last night that I did not observe, but somebody else did. And the kitty cat, I didn't notice the kitty cat notice anything.
Well, give it time. You know what I mean? New at the job. Mm-hmm. So every ghost hunter has a first day, I imagine. And we also know that it gets more complicated because not all humans experience reality the same way. Your existential mileage may differ, and when an individual or group perception strays too far from the majority perspective or consensus, we call those people insane.
But that concept alone gets to the heart of, I think, this episode. In the end, we kind of have to choose the way we want to believe the world exists entire, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get down into the deeper levels, like an individual person, and can they actually perceive something that we cannot? You have to decide whether or not you believe that, right now at least.
You have to observe and measure, yeah.
But again, it also blows my mind. We humans can build the most sensitive equipment that can find gravitational waves if we want them to, which there is no other way for humanity or any other life form to detect those things that we're aware of right now. We can build this giant array, right, that can find gravity waves, but it doesn't mean anything. Those sensors don't mean anything if it doesn't have an output that turns it into something we can either see or hear or touch.
Somehow perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it doesn't solve the problem that humanity still quarrels with, which is this. What is gravity? Why and how and where and when gravity? I mean, it's the same question with reality, you know.
When like gravity is?
When, you know, all your gravity are belong to us. I don't get it. I don't understand gravity. We also know that reality is neither, as to your point, is neither as consistent nor as constant as it appears at first blush. You go through your day-to-day, stuff tends to fall at the same, I'm throwing things, stuff tends to fall at the same measurable pace. You know, light usually behaves the way one would expect it, as long as you don't look too closely, because the closer you look, the weirder stuff gets. There was a great quote from a group of journalists writing in New Scientist. They were talking about reality, and they said the following, quote, "We don't know when it began, how big it is, where it came from, and where it is going, and we certainly have no clue why it exists." Which I think is a question a lot of us don't consider often. Why is reality a thing?
Right? I looked at that article, Ben, and I was like, I can re-up my New Scientist right now, or I can read a different article, and I read a different article. But that's a great way to open. I think that was like one of the first lines in that article.
And it's so good. Some things haunt you. You know what I mean? These folks are definitely good to hang out with, and they're making an excellent point. You know, the rules get fuzzy at the very, very small and the very, very large scale, and this brings us to something that I think inspired you for this episode this evening, which is the double slit experiment and observer effect.
Yes, we have to go way back to ye old 1800s. In fact, the year after it switched over, 1801, when this fellow named Thomas Young came up with a thing that we now know as the double slit experiment, which is very, very important. That's why we're doing this episode. It is the initial experiment that led humanity down a bit of a rabbit hole. And it's pretty incredible because it's influenced so many other very good thinkers to think very hard about the nature of reality. And it's attempted to give us a window, maybe a two-slitted window, into what this whole thing is that we're going through every day. But why don't you tell us about this guy?
Sure. Yeah. Thomas Young is what we will call a boffin, a Renaissance man, you might say. He's a egghead. He's super into all sorts of stuff. He's really good at math. He contributed research to everything from Egyptology to physics. And then one day, like you were saying, around the turn of the century, this guy said, I wonder if Isaac Newton is wrong about light. Now, light may seem like an academic debate. People are really hot about this at this time in human history. There was this ongoing argument. What is the substance of light? How does light travel? Should we think of it like Christian Huygens proposed, like a wave? Just a wave of stuff emanating from things in chemical reactions? Or should we think of it like a series of little pew, pew, pew particles?
Well, yeah. When we perceive a light, again, we go back to our base experience. You turn on a light and now there's light everywhere that light can basically shine on, right? And just that concept of how does it travel? How does it function? Right. This is a huge deal. I would say, well, no, I know the prevailing thought there is that they are light particles. And then there's another school of thought that is, hey, maybe it is waves. Maybe it does function as waves. So we thought, well, maybe here's a cool way to prove that by shining light through two slits.
Yeah, it is one of the most famous experiments, as you said, in all of human history. The tools are maybe distressingly simple. You can play along at home. You just need a light source, a thin card with two holes or slits cut within it, side by side, and then you need a screen that
something
the
for the light
will
to hit, right?
Right, yeah. And so our buddy Young, I guess, took a long enough break from Egyptology to conduct this experiment, and his idea was pretty simple. He said, "Look, just like you were saying, Matt, if we can measure the way the light moves, we will determine whether it is a wave or a series of particles. If the light is comprised of particles, then it will shoot through those two slits, and at the screen you will just see two dots, right? And if it's a wave, something different." Right?
Well, yeah, or you would at least see the two slits, right? The outline of what the slits look like projected on whatever the device it is that you're using to see the light.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, a great deal of human science is discovered by accident. People are looking for one thing and they discover another, right? That's how alchemists ended up with chemistry. So Young also follows this sort of tendency. He doesn't see what he reasonably imagined or predicted. Instead, when he shines this light through this double slit experiment, he sees an alternating pattern of dark and light bands on the screen. The best way to describe it maybe is it's kind of like a pointillism version of a barcode, right?
Yeah, that's most intense at the places where you would imagine those two slits would have light shine through them, and then kind of dissipates, getting lesser and lesser as you move away from the two slits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like someone drew a barcode by just sort of putting little dots.
Yeah,
around.
Well, that's when Thomas Young isn't shooting particles of light yet, right? Thomas Young is just using a light source,
right?
So, like, you're not getting as much of the dots as like the lines, right?
Right. He is not yet, or the better way to say it is the double slit experiment is still in its infancy. It still has that new car smell. It hasn't been reproduced and refined over and over, but the patterns that we see remain inexplicable. So our buddy Young is trying to explain this. He's surprised. He wants to understand it. And he says, okay, well, this means light travels through space like a wave of water, highs and lows, crests and troughs. And thinking this way, he said, all right, here's what's happening. Light waves are traveling through these two, tunnels, right? Very small tunnels. And when they get out, they are like expanding on the way when they emerge from these restrictions, these two slits. And what I'm seeing, he says, is that bright bands are forming where these two waves of light overlap. They add together, so they make things brighter because they're light. And when I see the dark bands, he says, it's where the crested troughs somehow cancel each other out. That makes sense, he thinks, kind of.
Well, yeah, it was very similar to observations that had been done with fluid dynamics and water. And when you've got interference patterns, basically, if you imagine dropping two things in the water about, let's say, 4 feet away from each other in the same body of water, when those things hit that body of water, you get the waves that move out from it, right? In circles. We've all seen this before. Imagine those two sets of circles start to interact with each other as they're moving, and you get exactly what Ben's describing, these interference patterns.
And this experiment, as we said, has been replicated countless times with varying levels of refinement, with varying levels of sophistication and measurement, but we're still not at the crazy part. And maybe we need a little bit more background for that.
Yeah. Okay. So Young is using a light source, as we were saying, and light sources have gotten more and more complicated and intricate over the years. Humanity has figured out how to shoot basically beams of light. Think lasers, think very specific photon emitters. These are things now. So you can send out a single particle and or wave of light, a single instance, let's say, of a light. And so when you can now do that, and you've still got this double slit experiment going, you find some weird things, because sometimes when you shoot those single light particles and or waves out, one will travel through either the left slit or the right slit. And it gets really weird when you try and detect which of the two slits a single particle goes through.
Yeah, that's the creepy part. If either path through those slits, and I hate that we're saying slits so much, but that's, the name of the experiment. If either path is monitored, then stuff will seem to pass through a discrete choice. It will go either through aperture A or through aperture B. But if you shoot the light through and you do not measure it and you do not monitor it, then those photons, regardless of how sophisticated or crude your light emitting device is, those photons will appear to have passed through both of those spaces at the same time and then interfere with themselves, acting like a wave. Por qué no los dos, man? It's nuts.
It seems to say that our basic understanding for a long time of what light and perhaps matter, even at the tiniest forms, is still elementary, and we don't fully understand what it is.
100%.
And that is freaky, because scientists since that time, since the 1800s, as you said, Ben, have been attempting to refine this experiment in ways, using very different things we're going to get into, but nobody still, I feel like I'm spoiling everything. Nobody still has an exact grasp on what the heck these particles / waves really are and how they actually function.
Not even a spoiler. It would be a spoiler if someone listening tonight knew what was going on. Write to us, conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Help science improve.
There's no end to the number of people who have a hypothesis, right?
Oh, true. Yeah. We got to get Terrence Howard on the phone.
1 times 1. What happened to the other one?
So this is the observer effect, which will be familiar to a lot of us. It's the idea that a system may be influenced or affected or disturbed simply by the act of observing that system in progress. Or a better way to say it is the idea of measuring that system may influence the results of those measurements.
But it seems to influence the behavior.
Exactly. And that's the troubling thing. That's kind of our deep water, right? Whether particles or waves. In the observer effect, maybe a metaphor or a comparison, a simile, is the best way to think about it. The observer effect is kind of like that old story about watching a pot of water and waiting for it to boil. But in the observer effect, the fact that you are looking at the water changes whether or not the water boils and how it boils. And that is, by the way, as far as we know, looking at a pot of water about to boil, your perspective does not influence that. unless you have like low-key pyrokinesis, you are not making water boil faster, or cryokinesis.
That's why this is so frustrating. We've created technology, a pot, and a way to make fire underneath that pot, and some clean water to put in that pot. And we put all those things together, and we know, hey, eventually that water is going to boil.
Right.
We know it for sure.
Right. Based on our understanding of linear time as well, which gets even weirder. I mean, this takes us to the concept of wave collapse, right? The old dilemma of Schrodinger's cat. The cat is both alive and dead until you open the box. I don't know. I think this is already kind of weird, but I was thinking, Matt, about different ways to play with the concept of observer effect. It's, we often take it to mean in popular science that a conscious mind can somehow affect reality. And perhaps that is true, but there's no current proof that the observer or the measuring device needs to be conscious. It makes me wonder, like, if we got different non-human animals together and had them watch the double slit experiment, would that affect it? You know what I mean? And if so, which animals count as observers in that regard?
I think all of them, man. I think anything that has senses is conscious in some degree or another. Like I've fully come to believe that now. It just over the years, man, as we've been learning about what we would call animal intelligence, like honestly, man, you've inspired me a lot with your fascination with it, because it makes me want to learn more, especially when it comes to like corvids and some of the things we've kind of had a deep dive into, and cetaceans. It feels like even plants now, when we did that episode, even plants may have a consciousness that we have previously just kind of thrown out and said, that's not consciousness. They're not thinking about thinking. Like, are you sure though? I think they might be.
You sure about that's why? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we're often on the same page with these sorts of questions, because one thing we can all agree on, hopefully those of us playing along at home as well, is this. Every experiment like this, it might be challenging, it might be scary. Reality is philosophically terrifying, because it's a thing that no one can escape and no one understands. All of it shows us that there is a tremendous amount of stuff we do not know about the universe, or universes, I'm being that guy, in which we reside. I mean, I guess we gotta get to an ad break, but without getting into further into some of the murky waters of quantum thought and mechanics, we also know that humans, despite not understanding regular reality, are building new realities. That's kind of weird.
It is weird, and I love those realities, a lot of them. Some of them I detest, but a lot of them I'm really into, especially the ones that have good stories and gameplay, which is really just what makes a good game. Anyway, what can those virtual worlds teach us about this very real world?
Yeah, what does it mean? What could it mean for reality today, for reality in the future? Here's where it gets crazy. All right, how would we explain virtual reality? The most crappy explanation is it's a version of a thing that was around earlier that we still don't understand.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, it's a simulated closed system reality, right? It's a device, a system of devices that can trick your meat sensors into believing that those sensors are interacting in some other place at some other time in some other way.
Yeah, well put, I think. Personal experiences. Do you recall the first time you engaged with something we would call virtual reality in like the technological sense?
Yeah, I think it was a friend. It was my cousin who had one of these, like an early Oculus that you had to plug in. So it was, your computer was directly plugged into it through cables. It wasn't one of these little, wireless guys that are running around today. And I remember the feeling specifically of doing it's kind of like the plank thing that Noel's talked about on the show here before, where you're up at a very tall height and this device tricks you into feeling as though you are very high up, and you have, or at least I experienced bodily reactions to that feeling as the way my body would react if I was on the edge of a building.
Because it hacked your proprioception.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like the idea of emulating input such that the body's sensory filters say this is real, or it's real enough that we're not going to take the chance of you falling off this plank.
Exactly. And that goes to everything in some of the zombie games that have come out over the years, some of the games where there's a real fear, a fight or flight response to, something that you see as adversarial coming at you, or you can hear it, right? It sounds like it's around the corner. It hacks you in ways that I'm still uncomfortable with.
Yeah, and we need to know more. I mean, this is the surprising thing. All right, brief history of virtual reality. And we're going somewhere with this, folks. The term itself is relatively new. Like when most people hear the phrase virtual reality, you're thinking of immersive technological experiences, but the concept is inarguably ancient. It's metaphysical belief. It's Gnosticism. It's Plato's cavern. It's imagination. Every time you have a dream, you have created a virtual reality or just a daydream. It's like you said, a closed system of experience. That's what a virtual reality is, which means that every thought you have that you really think about, you're kind of making another world. Nothing weird. We're fun at parties. It's a Matryoshka doll of nested realities, worlds within each other.
Well, yeah, and how you think about yourself affects the worlds you create, and then all the other characters that inhabit those worlds, right? And the way you think about individuals and the way you hear a phrase from somebody, right? Or if you're walking down the street and somebody says hey to you, what does that mean when somebody says hey to you when you're walking down the street? Your bubble of reality that you're projecting ends up changing. Oh my God, it changes that source, right? We all do it.
It's what's interesting about that concept as well is that it leads us to the argument that one is never truly interacting with another. You're instead interacting with your perception of a person.
Ooh, no, totally. Wow.
Fun at parties.
That.
We do bar mitzvahs too. Quinceañeras, have us over. But I think you raise an excellent point there, Matt. I mean, the rules get fuzzy when we talk about virtual reality. You can witness, like you were talking earlier about catharsis, right? You can witness versions of reality in film, in books, in a good song. And on some level, we could say, oh, I know this isn't the real world, but experiencing those glimpses outside of agreed upon analog reality has this crazy effect. You said something I want to go back to. I was not aware of this in the early days of film, right? No one has seen a film. What is that? In the early days of film, one of the famous stories is a group of people assemble to watch some moving camera, and it's still all silent film at this point. And the part of what they're seeing features a train. Paul, can we get like a scary train noise? Perfect. They see a train moving toward the camera, hurtling along the rails from the camera's point of view. And we've all seen stuff like that before, right? But these folks had never seen a film before. They freaked out. They're like jumping away.
Like, is that an actual train that is coming at us right now? Well, then forget about the first time a gun was pointed at the camera. That was horrifying as well. And those little tricks, like even the movement of trees in the background, just sitting in a darkened theater and there's light projected on the wall and it looks as though the trees are moving. I wish Paul was on this episode because he could tell us all about the history of some of this stuff with his film knowledge. But man, it is weird how we've been tricking ourselves mostly with light and sound for so long for fun.
Yeah.
And profit.
Well, there's a profit motive, but you could say we've been tricking ourselves with the concept of currency in general. But also there's interesting, there are these cyclical, interesting breakthroughs in olfactory smell technology, and it just hasn't caught on yet because, it's weird.
That's the 6D experience.
Right. I mean, this sounds funny now, maybe. With the benefit of retrospect, we can say, oh, those folks were silly. But even just the idea of putting yourself in a moment where a gun is pointed at you in any context, that is a frightening thing. And it shows us a very important lesson. Perception is kind of reality. At this point, perception is reality. You could also say perspective is power. We'll get to it. But humans have been creating new realities all the time, forever. And with each technological innovation, like you were saying, the ability to create these worlds only expands. And these worlds become more sophisticated. They have a closer fidelity to the world you're used to. They may one day become indistinguishable. And I was surprised to learn just the term virtual dates back to the 1400s. I had no idea.
What? Okay, if it goes back that far, what is what could it mean?
It comes from, it ultimately comes from a Latin phrase meaning excellence, potency, or efficacy, or literally manliness. That's a weird one.
Oh,
yeah. But the idea is, if something is virtual, it has verisimilitude. It is very much like the real thing. So,
okay.
When we say in American English pretty often, it's virtually impossible to blah, 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 or it's virtually certain that so-and-so. And usually I think colloquially that means there is a 90% plus chance of something. But virtual in the 1500 or 1400s and so on, it basically meant really close to real, right? Not concrete, but close enough that unless you actually smack the stone, you would think this was the thing. It wasn't used in computing till 1959. So the fast forward through the etymology here, the earliest use of the full term virtual reality is actually French, la réalité virtuelle, and it comes from 1938, and it is entirely from this playwright who talked about theater as an alternate version of reality, curated reality. Theater is double. And he writes that in 38. It gets published in 1958. And then just a year later, the Boffins and the pioneering parents of computing start using the phrase virtual reality to talk about software.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would just say software and hardware, right? Because the virtual realities that have been created don't do anything for your proprioception if they're just on a screen. Because humans, as you said, have been exposed to light projected for a long time, which is just our screens now, right? So if you're playing a video game system, it's not really a virtual reality experience. You got to have that trickery, right? Which is, this is Jaron Lanier, I think is how you say it. He's a big deal.
Yeah, agreed. A legend in his own right. He's often called the founding father of virtual reality. He's a fascinating guy. We've referred to his work in previous episodes. I love hearing this guy talk. I love learning his thoughts, even if I don't always agree. He worked at Atari in the 80s. He left and he founded the first company to sell VR goggles and wired gloves, like you're talking about, the hardware you need. Did you ever have a power glove?
I did have a power glove, for sure, but I never got to mess with this stuff. And I think we mentioned it on a different episode. Maybe last time we did a simulated reality episode or something. We talked about how simple the software was, like what you actually saw and interacted with when you had those goggles on and wore those gloves. It was just a couple of polygons, basically, that moved super slowly. But still, that the real hack in there is that your hands and head movement are controlling what you're experiencing.
Right. Yeah. And, there might be some of us tonight who say it's wrong for us to call it trickery, but it is, they
Come
are
on.
just polygons. Come on. Come on. We're not being jerks. We're telling you it's not the same as the other world prime. You know what I mean? And this can be a beautiful and terrifying thing. Lanier has talked at length about the online world. And the funny thing is, the further we get in this new arms race of innovation, the more prescient his statements become. He knows what he's talking about. He wants people to be ready for some very weird stuff, like, I don't know, fiction is priming us for it too. Like, remember Ready Player One?
I do, yes, where I guess it was a lot of the economy then at that point is wrapped up in those virtual worlds that are created. And there's like there's one company that rules all of those worlds. And I watched it not that long ago, and I really do enjoy the story, but I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting closer and closer to the point where people want to spend time in those virtual worlds the same way I'm literally sitting here thinking about the world of Fallout 4, and I want to get back in there for just a little bit because I haven't played it in a couple days. But it has no bearing on anything in my life, but I still want it.
And it does have, those experiences are close enough to, your experience walking around in this environment, right? Those experiences are close enough that they can trigger neurological reactions, even hormonal changes. I think there is something real about them. You know what I mean? To some degree. And of course, everybody who's been a gamer or reads a lot, you might have that weird feeling when you beat a game, and the credits roll, or you finish a book and you think, oh, I'm back.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
Well, you also are gifted with this feeling of accomplishment, even though all you did was press some buttons for a long time and sit on the couch for too long. But, look, I say that as a lover of games, and I will defend the my right and your right to play them, and that it's actually pretty good for us in a lot of different ways. But in the end, in this reality, it truly is, at best, sharpening your perception, right?
Right. Perception. And right now, as we record on June 3rd, 2024, it is virtually certain, there we go, that people know when they are in one of these human-created environments. They know when they are in a curated, constrained experience. That's why in Ready Player One, everybody knows they're logging into a thing and they're going online. Everybody knows that. They're incentivized socially and economically to do so, but they are very much aware there is a different preceding world. But then there's another thing, one of our favorite films on this show throughout its history is The Matrix. In The Matrix, there's nested reality, and most people don't know they're in it. They don't get to consent.
Well, yeah, all of their sensory systems are hooked up to hardware that makes them believe they are in reality, which is a creepy thing to think about. And I've been thinking about it since 1999, and I shall never cease thinking about it until I'm unplugged and Trinity or whoever drops down and gets me out of here.
I keep thinking, I think you can be haunted by good thoughts just the way you could be haunted by a spirit. And I will never forget the explanation line. It's a throwaway line in this amazing film where they say, maybe we're in a simulation now. They didn't know what everything tasted like. That's why everything tastes like chicken.
Oh, God.
Do you remember that line?
Yeah, but I couldn't tell you what it's from. Write to us.
It's from The Matrix.
Oh, it is from The Matrix.
Yeah.
Is that when they're talking about steak? He's trying to, what's his name? Joey Pantolioni Joey Pants is like, ah, man, this steak is so good. Yeah, I want steak.
I think maybe that's it. We got to rewatch it, but yeah, write to us because it'll give us an excuse to rewatch the film. You know, it's weird. We've known each other for so long, and I don't think we've ever watched it together. We just keep talking about it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, quick shout out for the episode of Movie Crush where I talked to Chuck about The Matrix, and we go deep on, I think that line is in there in our discussion bit about the chicken.
Nice. Movie Crush is great. I never got a chance to be on it, but I loved hearing the conversations. And Chuck is a phenomenal interviewer.
We need to bring it back.
Yeah, we'll see what he says, you know. And I think they're on tour right now, so check out Stuff You Should Know on the Road if you get a chance. Show not to be missed. For the nature of, like, if we wanted to, or if some entity wanted to arrive at a seamless virtual world, a Matrix level world in which people could not distinguish between the world you're in now and a created or curated one, Lanier had a couple of big speed bumps. And in 2013, he talked about something that, Matt, you had mentioned earlier, the two big problems, hardware and software. He said hardware is going to solve itself eventually, just with economy of scale. The more you make, the more iterations you make of a thing, the cheaper the thing becomes in the grand religion we call economy. But the software is the pickle, right? Virtual worlds have to respond much more quickly for human users, but you have to have multiple people coming in and connecting. The network has to be seamless. And he says it's going to take a while to figure out how to make the network work without hiccups. And that, you know, I wanted to ask you about this, Matt. It reminds me of the concept of lag when you're playing video games. Have you ever played online and got caught up in a lag situation?
Oh, yeah. I've broken several controllers because of lag.
Broken them?
I've lost several very important Ultima Online characters due to lag and getting logged out because I think my family needed to make a phone call and my 56K modem was attached, and when they unplugged it, it was over. But yes, this concept of lag, if your perception of reality could be so easily interrupted by like a couple frames getting dropped or skipped, right, then you would lose that proprioception trickery, and it would no longer feel like a virtual world. Of connecting this back to our shared reality, this one that you're listening to this podcast in, I've never experienced lag like that. We've experienced I know I have experienced some weird things with reality, like a blip in time, or when the lights all flicker at once, or a weird sound, or, you know, seeing a specter in my doorway, where it makes you feel like, oh, well, maybe this reality isn't exactly what we all think it is, or it doesn't function the way we all think it does. But I've never seen anything like lag, which is a terrible and real problem when it comes to processing that much information at once for multiple people. But I would argue, and what'd you say? Lanier said this a long time ago?
2013, so about 10 years ago.
So I think we're actually there now. If you think about some of these large scale games that are run in the cloud essentially at once and served to everybody, essentially via a supercomputer of sorts, I think we might be there.
Yeah, we're getting very close, right? And one thing that's fascinating about human technology is as it improves, it tends to emulate parts of nature, right? The most sophisticated systems and structures and processes are echoing things that already naturally occurred, because that's the most efficient way for that stuff to work. And natural reality also already needed hardware and software. The hardware is your body and all the physical forces surrounding you, seen and unseen. And the software is your mind, as you're listening now. I'm trying to make my eyes look less crazy. Sorry. Your mind as you're listening now, and the minds of every other living thing you encounter. The tricky part is not all the software is the same. And I'm still, Matt, I'm still stuck on, to your point. Yes, I agree. massive online role playing or massive online gaming in general is reducing a lot of lag. I'm just thinking about waking up one evening and you walk outside and you have a laggy connection with the world. You know, that would be so weird.
Ben, you said that and your video froze as you said that, and then it picks back up. That was nuts.
Let's not look too closely, right? Let's take reality at its word. All right, well, we'll check our connections and play some ads. Okay, we have returned. As we said, Matt, you and Paul and I are recording this on June 3rd, 2024. And I love the point you made that we are in an era of breakthroughs, right? Escalating breakthroughs, feedback loops of innovation. And I think a lot of the stuff that was once considered science fiction is becoming science fact, right? Do you think we'll reach a point where someone would be unable to distinguish a virtual reality from a physical reality?
Hopefully not. And hopefully creators of such realities would know how dangerous that could be. I think you would build in something, whether it's a HUD, like a heads-up display, or something that would make you aware at all times that you are not in actual reality. They're at least
a
the
little
one that
banner ad that pops up.
Well, it could be that, but just something in the corner that's literally a menu or something, or a place where you could place your hand, and everybody knows if you put your hand here, you will bring up the menu every time, or a button, or something to where a human being, you'd make it a lot less likely that a human being could get fully lost.
Right. Yeah, kind of similar to, I think in some countries, maybe it was China, there were moves to restrict the amount of time people could spend immersed in, like, an internet cafe, right?
Yeah.
Because people were going so deep, going so hard, to the point where the only thing that took them out of that experience was the physical need for stuff like food, water, and excrement,
Which was often solved by getting a little creative with your seat.
Yes. Yes. Getting a little spicy with the seat. And we know, I appreciate what you're saying there, because I think it is statistically inevitable that humans and machines will continue to meld together, increasingly inextricable. It sounds nuts to say, what if there's a world in a few years where you have an AI avatar that legally represents you? It's like your valet, your digital doppelganger. It does all the stuff that you need or that you don't want to do. And that sounds nuts, but not too long ago, people thought it was ridiculous that someone would always have a cell phone or a smartphone. Why would you spy on yourself? And now billions do it.
Well, yeah, you can see it already in the workings of things like Siri and Alexa, where you can program those pieces of hardware and software to give you an update on your day, right? Here, you can give it access to your email, right, and your schedule and all this stuff. And even in Microsoft, with our enterprise systems, it will say, "Hey, morning, Ben. Here's what's on your plate for the day. This person has a question about this. This person has a question about that. You need to do this." And I don't think it's automated fully to the point where you could, through that system, just give it a couple of quick answers and then it would reply to all the emails and do the things exactly the way you'd want it to. But I imagine that's coming up very soon, where you have a meeting in the morning, 5-minute meeting to get the rundown, take care of all your stuff. And then anything else that pops up, you get alerted to it.
And it's normalized now because it's a common thing that people can experience, right? Google or Alexa, we have given these identities to these things. We have put a language, nomenclature upon them. I mean, also, let's just say it out loud. A lot of us are listening to this on those same smartphones we're describing, or on the Alexa, right? Or the Amazon Echo or what have you. I think what's going to happen is humans are going to finally get past the hands. I think that's another step too.
Oh, I hope not. I like the hands.
I'm a fan of hands.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of hands. I will die on that hill if I have to, if need be. But, it's going to sound crazy. Like, for anyone who just had a child this year, first off, congratulations. Secondly, if not by the time your kid is 30, by the time your kid has a kid that turns 18, if the world doesn't collapse, it is going to sound crazy that you used to type with your hands.
Yeah. You used to type with your hands. You used to do so many things with your hands. But now you kind of you can wave if you want in a couple of different ways. You can still use them. Just don't touch anything.
Why would you touch stuff? What are you, old? I do think it's funny how we normalize these things, but it'll maybe go the way of the old modem scream, like you were talking about with the 56-bit connection. Was that one of those things where it goes through the phone line and it has that weird noise? What was that noise?
Yeah, ultimately it's using your phone system, the same lines that connect your phone to the outer world and the network. It's using that to literally dial in to the internet, to a server somewhere.
And we don't even have to play the noise. I think we can all hear it.
Oh, well.
Should we play it?
Anybody born in the 1900s, yes.
Paul, yes, please play it. Oh, you'll love to hear it. You'll love to hear it. Do you think it's likely, though, or possible that within the lifetime of people listening now, would it be possible for an individual to one day live entirely within a constructed reality and not know?
Like maybe someone's born into a system?
Like Matrix style. Could it happen?
I don't know. I feel like that's not going to happen unless it plays out literally like the Matrix, where man versus machine, and man for some reason is useful to machine, but I don't think it would be.
Right. That was the nicest part of the Matrix mythos was the computer empire, the robot empire, machine empire decided, well, we'll keep them around for something. Yeah. Batteries.
Yeah. Batteries and goo. They make such good goo.
Guys, have you ever had quality human goo? Oh, boy. I don't know if we should keep that one.
You should take it however you want. All kinds of different goo.
Perception and perspective. Yeah, this might be helpful when we're talking about this before we get to back to observer effect, which is what we're kind of setting up here, right? It may be helpful given that every person, a meat person or a digital person, what have you, everyone is living in a kind of self-constructed reality. Perception is your reality, but it is your specific reality. It's the stuff you experience and assume to be correct. Other perceptions are not the same as yours. And that's part of the reason people argue so often. So it might be better to think in terms of perspective. Perception says, I am the ultimate arbiter of my world, right? I am the protagonist. The way I encounter and experience and understand things, that's the main thing. And if someone has a problem with that, they're wrong. But if we move from perception to perspective, then we can ask how a reality is different. What is it that this person or this entity is experiencing? And we can try to, the weird way to put it is it's like trying to understand the alien software of another mind. And it's a tough thing to do, I guess it's empathy.
Yay for empathy.
Yeah. I think that's going a long way. We'll see how it does.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I have an 8-year-old, so I know that the only way for him to truly learn lessons, doesn't matter how many times I tell him what the lesson is, what the parameters of it are, what the outcomes potentially are, unless he does a thing and experiences the consequences of that thing, it doesn't seem to sink into his head. And I'm sure I was the same way. I'm sure most of us are the same way. I just don't know how any of us can truly understand something until it has happened to us, right? Or we have observed it and perceived it and then basically applied our perspective to it.
Yeah, it reminds me of it was a little bit of a personal thing. I'll keep it short. It reminds me of an adage I learned from my mother before she passed. She was a teacher for some time, and she had some, I'm trying to remember, it was something like, when I hear, I forget. When I see, I remember. When I do, I understand.
That's cool. That's amazing.
Maybe, maybe.
No, because I feel that way. I totally feel that way. Except, yeah. The only thing some people learn really well when they hear and not well when they see, right? So that's the only thing. But I
learning
totally
styles, right? Yeah,
exactly. But I totally understand exactly what that means. If I haven't done a thing, I don't really understand what it is or how it feels.
Also, there's nothing in that little proverb about the smell. You know what I mean? What happens when you smell? How does that? What if someone said, "Oh, my primary learning style is smell"? Could you explain algebra in like a more olfactory way?
Here, try this. I understand.
Take a whiff of this calculus. I mean, okay, so now we're still exploring questions that, spoiler, people haven't answered, but it does bring us back to the observer effect, the double slit experiment, the thing no one can really explain. Like, when we observe a thing, to what degree are we participating in that particular perspective of experience? When that person, to your earlier example, Matt, when that person walks by and says, "Hey," you hear them say, "Hey," whether or not you say something back to them, to what degree are you, by observation, participating in and affecting their reality? I don't know. Maybe that's just too fluffy.
No. It goes back to maybe my most weird thoughts on this whole thing. And it goes back to virtual worlds, and it goes back to imagining what it would be like if this world, this reality we experience, is some kind of information field of potentials. And in everything that we know and think we know and experience is a potential. And I imagine it as a chair in an empty room. This room you have been into before, you constructed that chair. You made it out of wood, right? And it's just sitting there. You know that it's there, but you leave and you die and you're gone. But then a couple hundred years later, another human being finds this room and walks into it and looks at that chair. What I'm imagining is that in between those two instances where this chair was seen, separated by hundreds of years, is that chair actually sitting there in that room? Or is the potential of that chair, the information that is contained of what that chair is it just sitting there idly, almost as data that isn't being currently processed? It's just kind of, it is the information field that is a chair that is constructed in very specific materials in a specific way. And all that information is there at all times. But until somebody opens that door again and looks at that chair, is it actually sitting in there? And it feels to me the way a virtual world is created, especially a very, very large one, where certain parts of a map of a world are not loaded, but it is known. The hardware is not processing any of that stuff, but the software knows what is supposed to go there, right?
Yeah.
It just hasn't injected it through the hardware system.
It hasn't loaded the map, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thought.
I don't know. I feel like there's something to that here. But it then goes back to the observer. And what is the observer? Is it an animal? Is it a plant? What is consciousness? What is the thing that observes so that everything is and exists and is being processed through hardware?
Yeah, send us your pets for some very not weird experiments.
Yeah, just in the mail.
Just in the please don't. We love your pets and we love the photos, but we think they enjoy their lives with you, folks. I think that is a fascinating thought, Matt, because It reminds me again right now, probably in the old evenings, the best comparison would be losing oneself in a story, right? But I think now the best comparison and the most relevant and immediate is what you're describing, the experience of gaming, especially in an immersive game. I sometimes will log into my old Skyrim stuff where I've and I'm not bragging here. I got 100% completion because I didn't want to go outside. You know, I'm not proud of it. I should have done better things with my time, but now I just walk around in this made up world. I don't even fight anybody. Sometimes I'm just like buying soup.
I'm genuinely impressed at 100%.
It's not cool. Don't. Like, it's not something to be proud of.
You should start making videos. One of my favorite ASMR guys, I think his name is the ASMR Nerd, and he does a bunch of videos, a whole series where he walks around Skyrim. It's just the sounds of the footsteps and the ambience and the wildlife, sometimes the music, and he's just talking. Oh, and here we have all those lovely fjords. It's amazing.
Beautiful. I mean, but also, you know, like you said, with another video game example, like you beat Elden Ring, right? Like you knocked the crap out of that. And you're still, part of you is still kind of in there. I can sense it. Yeah. But that's another example of this observation in an immersive world, because things will take time to load, you know? And the question is, where do things go when you're not looking at them? And I love the point you're bringing up about theory of mind when you're seeing your son grow cognitively and physically and think through things, right? You watch that guy learn language, which is amazing. And this, I think part of the theory of mind is the idea of object permanence, right? Does the thing exist when I do not physically see, touch, or hear the thing?
But what if it's object permanence for all things that have eyes and ears and noses?
Right.
And tongues.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I'm going too, man. Like, think about, it's the old tree falling in a forest concept. And I'm wondering, you know, it reminds me of, since we're talking about games, it reminds me of extraordinary objects or artifacts of power in Control.
Mm-hmm.
What are they called? Something. You know what I mean.
Objects of power is real.
Okay, object of power. I think one of those spoiler folks, there's something, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a refrigerator or whatever, but it's locked up and someone has to stare at it all the time. Because if someone is not looking at it, stuff goes horribly wrong.
Yeah. That's so cool.
I think now, I'm sorry, I've derailed this. I'm just talking about video games.
I loaded that game back up again to show my girlfriend, and she was genuinely interested, and she does not like video games, but it's because of all of those artifacts you get to find, all the papers, the documents, all that stuff.
God, that's so great. Can't wait. If you are interested in learning, if you like this show and video games remotely, you will love the show Control. Matt, I can't thank you enough for putting me onto that game. They have the studio has one called Alan Wake. Alan Wake 2 recently came out, and we're waiting for Control 2.
Are they going to do another one?
They're going to do another one, at which point I cannot wait to see what kind of ridiculous excuses you and Noel Barcelona Brown and I send to our colleagues, right? Like, how are we going to explain that we're calling in sick for a video game? I'm just going to be honest. I'll be like, guys, I've
been banking vacation days since 2019 in hopes that Control 2 would one day be released.
It'll just be a run of classic episodes. But there's something else too, Matt. This is what it leads me to think, and I'm very interested in your observations here. Observations. Okay, what if we created a virtual space, a virtual world or reality, and we conducted the double slit experiment there? What if we had everybody listening at home, and you and me and Paul and Noel, physically at a great distance from each other, logging in, and some portion of the group just looks at one slit, some portion looks at another. They're not in contact with each other.
I love the idea, Ben. I love this idea. Let's do it. First of all,
I don't know if I don't know if it's worth doing. I just think it's trippy.
Well, the second thing is, I think the outcome would depend exactly and precisely on the physics engine that functions in that virtual world.
Because that's the observer, right? That's the ultimate observer.
Well, because the physics engine has code that says this is how light functions in this environment, and this is how light interacts with these materials in this environment, right? So I think you'd be able to predict that every time simply because we know the underlying code.
We know the engine, yeah.
But in our reality, we still don't know what that is. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know who wrote it, if anybody wrote it. If it even is code, maybe it's just something else.
And that's the question, too. Has civilization arrived at a point where just from scrabbling around at the corners of experience, we found, a chink in the armor, right? A gap in the plates. And if that is true, if that is the case, what happens when we worry at that crevice? What happens when we pull the plate or the surface back? What do we see beneath?
Mr. Anderson.
Right. That's great. Oh, and then what if we set up real world then? What if we set up the double slit experiment and we let it run somehow for 1,000 years and we never intervene? And we never check on it until a millennia has passed.
And then we'll be like, oh, look, it's an interference pattern. Well, that's why there are people to this day, as of April 2023, it's still right now, it's probably happening. There are people who are trying to modify the experiment even further. There's a group, they just published in Nature last year from Imperial College. They were trying to do the double slit experiment, but with time dilation. And I don't understand it, y'all. I'm going to give you this so you can look it up on your own. It's in the Quantum Insider. It's written by Matt Swain, April 4th, 2023. The title is Time is on My Sides with an S. Researchers show double slit experiment also applies to time. And it has to do with putting some kind of material in front of the slits that basically slows down the light, I think. I don't know if that's right or not. I read the entire article and I still couldn't tell you exactly what it means. But it was iridium tin oxide that they used to make time slits, in quotation. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Sorry.
We have to continue the research. No, this is also, this is another thing that may be a future episode with your help, fellow conspiracy realists, because time is part of reality, or at least the way your perception and perspective of time, right? We all just sort of agree that it's Monday. You know what I mean? We all sort of agree that in one part of the world, it's 3 p.m. And then in another part, it's 2 p.m. And
because big light in sky.
Because, and railroad tycoons or whatever, and farming. But when you drill down into the concept of time, things also get fuzzy, because time is, just like reality, part of a thing everyone has collectively agreed that they pretend to understand. And just don't make it complicated. You know what I mean? Someone asks you about your schedule, don't say, here's the history of why the calendar is weird and it's not perfect, and we're actually a few seconds off all the time.
I just got the first weapon in Control 2.
Exactly, right. I think you mean Purvis Day, right? Whatever. I don't know. In any case, Matt and Paul and I, we think you can agree. The mystery only deepens. We are now at a point with scientific evidence where we can say reality seems to be dependent on factors human civilization does not understand. The scariest thing that this teaches us is that it appears that when one observes reality, reality looks back at you. it might know that you're watching.
Yeah, and it might change itself to either accommodate you or to trick you.
And to this date, we have not interviewed an electron nor a photon for their perspectives on the confounding nature of reality.
Even if they are particles.
Even if they just are particles that wave at us sometimes, right? If they see us on the streets, the mean streets of reality. If you are a photon or an electron or a person or a digital intelligence and you have some thoughts here, again, like Matt and I said at the beginning, if you can explain the double slit experiment, like if you can solve light, please write to us. We don't know if anybody's ever asked you if you have the answer to that. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also give us a phone call.
Yeah, you could call 1-833-STDWYTK right after you call Fermilab and explain to them whatever you figured out, or whatever those other places are that are doing this all the time. But if you call our number, you can leave us a 3-minute voicemail message. Give yourself a cool nickname and say whatever you'd like. Do at some point say whether or not we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say, they could fit in that 3 minutes. Attachments, links, whatever you got. Why not send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every email we get. Be well aware, folks, just like reality stares back, sometimes the void answers you. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.